Hello, 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 and welcome to another edition of Reality Rights. I am author Ellie Alexander. This is the podcast where we go behind the scenes on books, writing, all things bookish, and I'm here with the tech guy.
Hello, hello. We're rolling into, what episode is this?
I have no idea.
It's getting up there. Hey, we're cranking them out. Yeah. No, I think it's past that. But regardless, if you're a first-time listener, welcome. And for those of you who've been with us since the beginning, thank you. But, please follow us on your favorite podcast platform or here on YouTube if you're watching. We also have cool video with our smiling faces. And if you wouldn't mind dropping a review or rating, that would be awesome. And leave us some comments. Let us know what you think. What do you want us to talk about? What are your burning reader or writer questions? Because we'll cover all the hard stuff here on Reality Rights.
Yeah, we will. And we want to hear from our darlings. So
that's true.
Yeah. Lay it on us.
That's right.
So this week we're going to talk about writing multiple series.
Yeah. Somebody I know has experience in that.
Just a lad. Just a tad.
Writing multiple series at the same time.
Correct. Writing multiple series at the same time, although not necessarily writing them simultaneously. So there is a difference.
Yes.
But there is a difference there.
Yeah.
Should I just dive into that?
Yeah. Well, so we're covering the fact that you write multiple series. You have, but you're only working on one book in a series at a time, and then move on to the next series, as it were.
Yes.
So it's not like you're writing the same book at the same time. But maybe we'll get into that if that's where do you want to start? Because I know there are a lot of steps to this.
I know. There are so many talking points for this one. I think that's a good place to start because this is a question I get asked often by readers and writers, like both ends of the spectrum. How are you writing multiple series at the same time? So it is not as if I start my morning and I'm at Tort in, for any new listeners or darlings out there, one of my long-running series is the Bakeshop Mysteries. And I am currently working on book 21 in that series. So it's not as if I start my morning writing that series and then I take a break for lunch and I shift and I'm suddenly writing my new secret bookcase mysteries. That would be bonkers. I could not keep my head straight at all. But what I mean by writing more series than once is these books are coming out from multiple series throughout the year. So that will tie into kind of scheduling. But also, one thing that I will often do is I will write a really shitty first draft. Sorry, you can beat me out for that, but it's true. You should. I recommend this to all my writing students. Just crank out a first draft. That's about getting the story on the page. That's really about plot. Everything else happens in editing. So I will do that, let's say for Bakeshop. I'll finish Bakeshop 21 in a week or so here, and I'll set it aside and I won't touch it. And I will start maybe editing book 5 of the Secret Bookcase series. So it gives my brain a little break. And then once I've finished editing book 5 of the Secret Bookcase Mysteries, then I'll go back and I'll start editing Bakeshop 21. So there's sort of a rhythm to it.
Totally. But so let's talk about scheduling because you had mentioned that. And I think that's on our list of topics. There's really two different schedules. There's the writing schedule and there's three schedules really. I guess there's the writing schedule, there's the publishing schedule, and there's the marketing schedule. And those all connect. They all overlap. They're all integrated. So we should probably start with the writing schedule. Like, how does it work?
Exactly. So especially in writing multiple series, there are a lot of things to juggle. And I should say I am not alone in this at all. In fact, darlings, many of your favorite writers are likely writing multiple series because if you're trying to carve out an income as a writer, that's one of the ways that you're able to earn, even a livable wage potentially. For some writers, not even a livable wage. And I think most of us as writers have multiple ideas and stories that we want to tell. So I think, again, we did a whole podcast on organization, but this really does go back to thinking at this stage, you and I are looking 2 years out, 3 years
Right.
out sometimes
Right.
in terms of pub dates and marketing schedules.
Mhm.
And then backtracking that to be like, okay, well, I know the next Bakeshop Mystery is coming out in August of 2025. I need to deliver that book, in November of 2024 and like working my way back from that. So I need to start that book in July. So that's usually at least a launching point for creating the schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you're writing based on release date, obviously. So,
Yeah.
and because you're both a traditionally published and indie published author, you do have some flexibility on one side, but not so much on the other, in terms of when stuff is due. So you have to schedule things so that they line up. The different phases of the writing process line up and they don't overlap significantly, right?
Exactly. And one of the things that I do early on with my mystery writing students and my private coaching clients is we work out a schedule like this, because I think it's really helpful and motivating if you have some deadlines to hit. And so even if that deadline is self-imposed before you have a book contract, there's really something to building that structure in, especially at the early phase of your writing, because then let's say once one of these students goes on and either publishes it independently themselves or lands a book deal, they're going to be in that same position where it's like, all right, now game is on. Okay, book 1 is done. When's 2 coming? When's 3? You're off to the
Mhm.
races. So if you can establish some of these patterns early on, I think it's super helpful.
Yeah, and that gets hard too. The more series that you're writing concurrently, because there's only so much time. There are only so many hours in the day. There are only so many weeks in the year. It just it adds up. Um, so that covers the writing piece. Then what about the publishing piece? Because it works differently with traditional versus indie. I mean, the same steps need to be followed, but the timing is different a lot of the time.
Exactly. Although before we jump to that, the one other benefit that I see as a writer myself, and hopefully this comes through for readers, in kind of switching back and forth between series, is that when I'm writing, when I'm in a first draft, I am fully immersed in that world. With Bake Shop 21, this book is going to be set in Costa Rica. You and I went to Costa Rica earlier this year. I
Mhm.
took copious notes and pictures. And so I have just been in Costa Rica on the page, again, fictionally speaking for the last month and a half, 2 months, whatever it's been. And I have a harder time wanting to leave that world when I'm done writing a book, a first draft. I would keep being in that headspace, or I would be thinking, as this was early on in my writing career especially, I'd be thinking about plots and I'd be thinking about things that needed to change. But what I've learned and what I think is so critically important for every writer, and this is the piece that I hope comes through if you're reading one of my books, is that in order to really flesh out these worlds and bring them to life, you need some distance from that first draft. You have to set it aside for a chunk of time, whatever that means. Now my windows of time have tightened, but early on, I would set it aside for like 6 months and be able to come back to it with fresh eyes. Now maybe I'm setting it aside for a few weeks or a couple months. But the gift of switching and writing a different series while that first draft is resting is it takes my head out of that space. I have to focus on something new. I have to go be in a new world. So it really gives my brain a break from that book that I need some distance from.
But so talk about that, because there might be a lot of writers or prospective authors listening that you, because I hear you say this all the time. But tell people, why is it important that they get some distance from that first draft? Why shouldn't they just dive right into the next phase of like layering in things for the second, third, fourth drafts?
Yeah, I love that you use it to layering. It's all
It's all
seeking in.
layering. Yeah,
Good
totally.
job. Good job. Way to
I've
go, Ted
spent
Mac.
hours on that course content. Trust me.
I know, right?
I've
I
probably
believe
watched it more than most of your students, to be
that's
honest,
right.
just through the editing process and
Oh,
everything.
well, this
So
begs the
that's a
question:
little.
why have you not written a mystery yet? Huh?
Well, how do you know I haven't?
Oh,
Maybe I'm using a pen name that you don't know about.
oh. We need a tech guy book. Who's with me, darlings? We're totally on a segue here.
Oh yeah, I need one more project. That is exactly what I need right now. Yeah.
But I know you have some book ideas in you. We should do a whole podcast about this.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
I'm holding them to it.
Okay.
Anyway, I think it's super important because the headspace that you're in when you're writing a first draft is very different than the space that you need to be in when you're editing. And in my world, I call it layering. And that is, like I mentioned, the first draft is the bones of the story. It's trying to push the plot forward. A first draft is not intended to be full of beautiful language and sentences that maybe read like poetry and all those sensory details. And the other thing is, if you are so immersed in a story, I think it's really impossible. And I don't know, there are probably writers out there who would argue with me on this, and that's fine. Like if that works for you, that's great. But my slant is that in order to really see where things aren't working and where things are working, you need to have a little time away from that story to be able to come back to it and go, oh, okay, I can see where I was going here. Or I can see this thread and I'm going to follow that more. Or, ooh, this character is really coming to life on the page and I have no idea who this character is. I can't see them at all. Or, wow, I just dropped an entire red herring there that never got closed at the end. If you read a draft too quickly, I don't think you have enough time away from it to be able to necessarily be able to really home in on those issues.
Yeah, totally. It was something you said just reminded me real quick. You know, that this doesn't work for every writer,
Right.
and so people need to. So I just wanted to remind the darlings out there that are listening that yeah, when I asked about like dropping stuff in the comments and everything, what I don't want to hear is, well, Ellie, I was listening to so and so and they said you should do this. That's great. That's wonderful. You want to do that? Go for that. That's wonderful. This is reality writes, and we're going to talk about things from your perspective when it comes to writing, my perspective when it comes to marketing and living with a writer and everything. So just a reminder to everybody out there and those and you know, information for those who may be new. Everything we talk about here is what we've done, what we've learned, what's working for us. So
Definitely.
take that with a grain of salt, I guess.
I do think that like the vast majority of at least my writing friends and peers would share the same thing. And like every writing teacher I had in college and over the years, same thing. Like I want that plastered on my forehead. I don't need it now, but like early on I did it. And that's one of my giant talking points to new writers is because I think you're so excited about the story.
Yeah.
You just want to keep going. But the gift of distance, it's important.
Yeah, well, it's I mean that is true. That what you just described is true even in the world of like journalism or advertising. My degree in advertising, you the more time you spend looking at something that you've created, the higher the odds are that you're going to miss the glaring error. You know,
Every
you
single
just
time.
like because you might be looking at a misspelled word 100 times and you're like, yep, that looks great. Check, done. And then you get it back all marked up in red and you're like, what happened? It just like,
Yes.
you missed it because you've
Uh-huh.
been looking at it. Yeah.
You're too close to it. Yeah, exactly.
Too
And then
close.
like that will happen all the time. And then 6 months later, I'll go and like read something that I wrote and go, oh my gosh, there are
Yeah.
like two glaring errors here. So yeah. But yeah, so that's the initial schedule. In terms of publishing, especially with series, each publishing house and method of publishing kind of has its own model. And we're really in an interesting space, I think, right now with where the industry is going. So in traditional publishing, this would be like the big five houses, right? Usually you're publishing a book either once a year or two times a year for a series. And so for that, You're
Sorry.
cracking
Every
up.
time I hear this, I can't, like, for those of you out there who watched the show Castle when it was on with Nathan Fillion, and Stanya Kotick, I think
Well,
was
everyone
her name. Yeah.
hated each other.
I know, but on screen they had amazing chemistry. Anyway,
Yeah.
the one line, Castle, the character played a card game every month with very famous mystery writers, who played themselves in the series. So there was, like, now all their names are, of course, are
James
escaping me, but
Patterson.
James Patterson.
Yeah.
And well, I think
Yeah.
James Patterson was the one on the show who was like, they were giving Castle crap one game where, and he said, one book a year, Castle, seriously, one
Really?
book.
Right. One lame. Yeah.
One book, yeah. And hey, one book is one more book than I've written. So, like, if people are writing one book a year, that's great. But it just, every time I hear you say that, I always crack up.
So true, though.
I love Nathan Fillion. He's hilarious.
That show was just fantastic
Yeah.
too. Yeah. Okay. So for the big houses, you're probably publishing every 6 months to once a year, and you're delivering a book a year in advance of either of those.
This is wild.
publications.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So one.
So
year
right
in
now,
advance.
all the indie published authors out there are like,
I know.
what? You know, and you're like, yeah,
I know.
that's right. Because you have to think about it from, like, a publishing house perspectives. They have hundreds, thousands, I don't know. Like, they have a lot of authors writing for them. And so
Yeah.
they've got a lot of books coming out, and they can't release them all at the same time. And they do market research about, like, what genres sell best during which months, and, you know, all of that. And they don't want to stack similar titles up against each other and everything. So it's all predetermined. So yeah, that's crazy, because earlier in this episode, you said you're working on Bakeshop, the 21st Bakeshop Mystery.
Mhm.
The 19th just came out, like, you know, just
A month ago. Not even. Yeah.
Not even. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the 20th doesn't come out until February, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's, yeah.
So that's a much longer schedule, right?
Yeah.
Now, my hybrid publisher, Storm, they're in this in between space. So it's like I have every end of the spectrum right now. We've got traditional publishing, we've got the Storm model in the middle, which I sort of see as the real future of where the industry is going, and then indie publishing over here. So with that, I will be releasing 4. 1, 2. Oh, I got to move my hand. Oh, and now I just hit the mic. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 books this year with their model.
That's wild.
So, so the first 2 books released together at the end of June. I have book 3 that will be coming out right after this podcast airs. And then book 4 will be coming out in November, quickly followed early next year by book 5. So they're really capturing this idea of the fact that readers and darlings out there, and myself as a darling of other series, tend to devour books pretty quickly. And so really building a readership early on for new writers too, you know, where instead of having to wait a year or 2 for your next book to come out, if a reader really enjoys a series, they're going to be able to get books in a much faster model.
Yeah, and you're seeing that across all forms of media, honestly.
Yes.
I mean, it's definitely happening with TV and movies and streaming, for sure. But it's also happening with podcasts too. Even there are several podcasts I listen to where I'll listen to the most recent episode, and then I'm like, "What? I have to wait a week for the next episode? A week?" And then I'm like, as I'm thinking that, I'm like, "Oh wait, we release every week." So hopefully there are darlings out there that are like, I can't wait for the next episode."
I love it. Yeah. And then on the indie side, I have friends who are literally releasing a book a month, sometimes 2 books a month. Because they are in that now, they are tending to do, I would say, closer to more like a novella length. You know, the books might not be 250, 300 pages. They might be just under 200. Maybe they're coming in at like 170 or something like that. But that's kind of the indie publishing model where it's like, no, we can, if I'm writing and I'm in the flow with a series, then I'm just gonna keep producing. So then for us, because I'm in all of these worlds, which I love, because they all have overlapping themes, but they're all uniquely different too, which is pretty cool. But that means I have to be just very militant about my schedule and intentional about my writing time and planning. And then you have to come in with all of the marketing.
Yeah, and that is so and this is where it gets really complicated, right? When you're writing multiple series at the same time, because we will be discussing whatever it is you're currently writing. But we will also have to be thinking about content for something that you wrote, months
2 years ago.
before. Yeah, or up to a year before. And the marketing calendar is pretty long too, because it starts with like cover reveal, right? So that happens sometimes a year before the book's even going to be released. And then it is just this constant drip, drip, drip of, hey, the book's coming. It's up for pre-order. It's up for pre-order, and then, oh, it's out. And now you have to do all the marketing. So you're marketing something that was written 6 months to a year ago, but you're also, while you're doing that, you're having to think about the next release that's coming maybe within just a few months because of the way the calendar stacks up, with the multiple series.
Right.
And that it gets complicated.
So we get into Tetris territory.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and kind of competing with yourself to a certain degree too, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So.
Okay. Well, the other segue on this that I get asked, I think most often when it comes to writing more than one series is, how in the world do I keep my main characters straight in my head? Yeah. I don't think I've ever done a book talk where I haven't been asked this question, which I love. But I think that's so fascinating because for me, as the writer, if I think about Jules from the Bakeshop Mysteries, or Sloan, who is my sleuth and head brewer in my Sloan Krause Mysteries that are set in Leavenworth, Washington, or if I think about Annie Murray, my new secret bookcase sleuth, they're so different to me in my mind. It would be like saying, if you have 3 siblings, how do you keep them straight? Right? Like that's how they feel to me.
Yeah.
And none of them are twins. They all look very different in my mind too.
Right. Yeah. I think, I don't know. 'Cause I've heard readers ask that so many times at book talks, that you've been doing. I think one of the things that readers might not take into account is, for them, Ellie Alexander writes all 3 of those series. So it's just you writing it. But for you, those are 3 completely distinct worlds that are happening, right? So when you sit down to write Jules, you were just talking about it, you're in a completely different mindset than when you're sitting down to write Annie. And I can attest to that, because you do immerse yourself. Like, all of the recipes that you're baking are very bake shop focused, versus Sloan, who does some cooking and baking in that series too, but her recipes are totally different than Jules. And exactly.
Or like, I have one of your candles here, like I have a different candle. Like I have a bake.
Let me see that again.
Don't look. That's my fault. I didn't let it go long enough. I know.
Yeah. We'll have to do a podcast episode on proper candle usage, because
I'm bad at my candle
tunneling. That is bad. I do not make candles that tunnel. So that was a user error right there. I just want to clarify that, because anybody watching on YouTube would be like, oh yeah, that's tunneling. So
I know. Sorry.
Not indicative of the quality of the candles.
My bad, darlings. It's my bad. I did not follow the instructions. I also think that one thing that you don't see is how much doesn't end up on the page. So
that's a good point.
you can't see it from this perspective, but I'm working on a new series. So I have a suspect board right here next to my desk with images and notes, and I have multiple whiteboards around. When I was working on developing Annie Murray and that character, I have pages and notebooks and pictures and playlists, and I know what she would wear, and I know what she's reading, and that's just little touches of it probably come through. I mean, but if I put all of that into any of the books, it would be the most boring book you've ever read because it would just be pages and pages of like character notes, right? But I think that's another reason for me that they're so very different because they have different personalities, they have different growth arcs as well. They're all working on their own emotional growth, but in very unique and different ways. They all have different interests. They have different friends. They approach the world in a unique way. So that's another reason that I can't even fathom getting them confused. But I fully understand why the darlings are like, wait a minute, how do you write more than one at a time?
Well, and you do have to think about each of the series a little bit while you're writing one. Like if you're writing the Bake Shop, you in the back of your mind, and we've talked about this a lot, where you're still thinking about like Sloane and Annie, because you need to make sure that like characters aren't going through the exact same growth arc. They're not like Jules isn't like suddenly meeting this mysterious stranger that like makes her learn something about herself if that just happened for Sloane, like 2 books ago, for example.
Yeah, and also like I think the harder thing than characters even for me are like plot lines and murder
Mm.
points. Because 40 books in, I've killed a lot of people, fictionally speaking, right? um, and so thinking through how those have occurred, I don't want to like have written a Jules plot line, let's say, that is going to end up coming out at the same time, even though maybe it was written a year earlier as an Annie book where it's like, oh, it was poison or, like whatever the murder method even is. And the other thing that gets really tricky is all of the secondary character names. Not the like main casts of each of the series, because same thing I spend a lot of time making sure I really get to know Andy and Sterling and now Fletcher and Hal and Pre. But the suspects and anyone who's just in the story to move the plot forward, I do have to go back through and go, wait, did I use Peter? When's the last time I used Bob as a suspect name or, that kind of thing? So that gets tricky for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And that would get tricky. I mean, that's probably tricky just just inside the Bakeshop Mystery series itself, because it's at 21 books now. But then you add the layer of complexity of having multiple series to that. I can see where that would get, you just make sure you have a lot of notes.
Yeah, a lot of notes. Or sometimes it's frantically like flipping back and forth going,
Yeah.
The nice thing is the publishing houses do style guides for every book. And so that includes a list of every character. And in previous books too, the Bake Shop style guides are huge now, but they're a very helpful reference tool to be like, okay, wait, it's been, 10 books since I pushed somebody off a cliff or, whatever it is. I think we're okay.
Yeah.
But to your point on that, it's also, if you're writing multiple series, it's very different to be developing and building a series like I am with Annie, where we're just, out in the world. We'll soon have 3 books, but I'm 5 books in, and a series that is going to be at 21 books, because that's its own beast too. I need to make sure that the secondary cast are all getting growth arcs and time on the page over the years of writing a series like the Bakeshop Mysteries. So many of the secondary casts have become as popular, if not more popular, than Jules. And so, like readers always reach out, yes, you do, darlings, about like, where's Lance? I need more Lance, or, whoever it is. And it's easier to sort of dip into those even secondary characters because I'm really familiar with them 21 books later. Whereas with Annie, I'm still building out that world. And the more you write something, the more familiar you become with it. And this is going to sound a little woo woo, but it's true. Like the more other things appear to you that I hadn't even been expecting, where it's like, oh, okay, well, here's a new character. All right, let's go. Let's go. You're tapping on my head. Let's see where you're going to take me.
That's interesting. That actually made me think of a question. And like, do the series influence each other? Like for you, like, so as an example, what you were just talking about with the Bakeshop Mystery, 21 books in, I don't know, there's probably a dozen or more secondary characters that are now kind of like, first tier little letter A characters, for the most part, because they've been in so many books, right? But so when you're writing a new series like the Secret Bookcase Mysteries, is that like, do you think about that from the Bakeshop Mystery perspective? Are you writing thinking, ooh, I need to introduce, I only have like 3 characters right here. I need to introduce like another character right here that can start a growth arc because I need a larger cast? Does that...
That's such a good question. I don't think I consciously realized that, but that just happened in book 5, where it was like, wait, this series is growing too. I want to keep writing it. I'm excited about it. And we have, maybe like 4 secondary characters at this point, all of whom are getting lots of page time. And so a character worked their way in book 5. And I was like, initially, I thought this would potentially be another toss-away character. But I was thinking in the back of my head, like, oh no, this is like, Marty or somebody who I introduced in Bakeshop maybe 8 books in. So yeah.
Oh, weird. That's interesting. Yeah. And for the darlings out there, like, I totally ask questions sometimes on this show that I 100% already know the answer to, but I just think they might be interesting for the darlings to hear the answer. But that was not one. I had no idea.
So we've never talked about that.
That just came up. So I'm kind of proud of myself right now.
Yeah, as you should be. No, I hadn't thought that. When you said that, I was like, but also, I don't even know that I had like full awareness that was happening until I was done with the book. And I was like, oh, okay, wait, I see where this is going. Yeah.
Interesting.
I used to, when I would go here, and this from, watching me, you didn't usually come to some of my favorite author talks. I would go with a friend because you hadn't read the series, but I would come back and gush. And I always heard authors talk about like, oh, these characters who go off the page and they're doing all these things that they didn't script. And I was like, come on, that doesn't happen. No, you are the writer. You're narrating this world. But it's so true. Like, if you give yourself space to let those things happen, I think from a mystery, you really do need some sketch, some little blueprint of a plan to work from. But then within that, giving yourself space to see where the characters take you is always fascinating. And in this case, you'll meet this character in book 5. I was like, okay, I guess you're sticking around. I didn't know.
Book 5, which is coming out later this year.
Book 5 will come out in February of 2025.
Oh, okay.
That is A Victim at Valentine's.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. 4 is, got it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really fulfilling to write a series. It's such a gift. And this is another thing that I never would have anticipated when I started, that darlings would form attachments. I mean, I think you always hope that a reader will form an attachment to your main character, your sleuth, your protagonist. But I never anticipated that I would hear about secondary characters and that they would become so treasured and beloved or loathed, like in the case of Richard Lord or April.
April.
Yeah. So I think that's such a fun piece of series writing, that not only do you have the creative lens of getting to plot the murder and let your sleuth solve it, but you also get to bring in this whole crew of friends, allies, and maybe like a nemesis or two.
Yeah. No, that is interesting. Yes, readers have definitely come to love a lot of the secondary characters. Maybe a little too much sometimes. I'm not sure,
Right?
but
I know.
yeah.
Same for my editor back in the
Yeah.
day when I
Oh
was
yeah.
reading
Carlos.
Carlos. I know.
Carlos. Like
Every time she would email, she'd be
freaking
like,
Carlos.
I need some more Carlos. I'm loving
Yeah.
this book, but can we get
Yeah.
just like a few more?
I
Okay.
thought for a while there, I actually thought the Bakeshop Mysteries the series was going to have pictures because of some of the Carlos comments that were going back and forth. So
It's true. And sorry, this is a bit of a spoiler if you're new to the series. But maybe it's not a spoiler, but I won't say what happens. But there was a crime of passion fruit when a whole group of readers came wearing like Team
oh,
Thomas
Team
and Carlos
Thomas, Team
t-shirts.
Carlos, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Love it.
yeah. That was fun. I know you got to separate them.
Yeah, exactly. Could have gotten ugly.
Oh,
Yeah, but I think for me, I can't fathom not writing a series. I have written a couple standalones and I would love, and I have actually a few standalones that are sitting in
yeah.
a drawer waiting to be sent out into the world. But even with the standalones, it's like I thought they were just a solid standalone. And a year or two later, it'll be like, tap, tap, tap. Wait a minute. There could be a sequel. So I don't know. Maybe series writing is just in my blood. We'll have to see.
Well, I think for you, and I don't know if this is true of all writers, most writers, whatever, but I think you put the same amount of work, like setting plays such a huge role in the series that you write, but it also did in the Lost Coast Literary standalone that you wrote. And I know it will in these other standalones that you're dropping hints about that you have yet to finalize. Um, but is that one of the reasons that tap 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 happens? Is that you put so much effort into this world building that that's a place for you. And I know a lot of your settings, all of your settings, are inspired at the very least inspired by real places, if not actual real places, themselves fully. So how much does setting play a role in making that happen?
I think so much. And again, that's another gift. If you're a writer listening to this podcast, like you get to create these fictional spaces or take a real space and turn it into a fictional world. And so there's a lot of escapism that goes into the process of writing. And I feel these places calling me and I want to spend more time in there. And I think and hope that's what darlings take away when they read the series too, that they feel like setting is another character. I want you to feel like you are walking through the plaza in Ashland, or that you are, like on a Bavarian pretzel and listening to the polka band when you're in Leavenworth, or you can smell the like musty pages of the bookstore in the secret bookcase. So yeah, I think setting plays a giant role, not only in helping to really set the series in time and space, but also to bring readers in. And then selfishly, when I'm writing, I'm like, ooh, where am I going to go next? I've been in Costa Rica with Andy and Jules for a little while. And next, I'm going to go back to Redwood Grove, I think, or I'm off to Leavenworth.
I'll have to see if I have any other work trips I can schedule in different places that we haven't been, so we can reclassify them as research trips.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and then when I'm working on something new, like this project that I have the murder board by my desk here for, that's an entirely new setting, and that's going to be loosely based on Santa Cruz, not quite Santa Cruz, but Santa Cruz adjacent. So we've taken a few trips over the last year there, and that's the other thing about like that schedule. Like this book won't come out until 2026. But I have been working on it for all of 2024. So it gives you kind of a scope of all of the other layers, I guess, that go into putting a full book out into the world.
Well, and so, but that's interesting because some readers, some writers that hear you say that might think, oh, well, yeah, I mean, you're working on the book for 2 years, but you're not going to be working on the book for 2 years. Like you're going to write it now and it comes out in 2026, but when is it done? When does it go to, like, in that case, in this particular book's case, like, when is it done?
I'll deliver this book I'll deliver this book like next spring, basically. Yeah.
So like,
and then it'll work. The publishing house will work on it for a year with me. So
right.
Yeah.
So it's not like, when you say, like, in traditional publishing, like the book comes out a year or two later, like that is not, you're not just like leisurely writing the book over the course of a year or two.
It's 10 minutes today and then 10 minutes tomorrow.
It is set, like ready to be printed and ready to go months before the release date. So yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Listen. Well, I hope that the takeaway this week from this episode, if you are a darling who is a writer, that if you've thought that you were just writing one book, maybe you try to stay open as you're going to see if there's a second book that starts going tap, tap, tap. And if you are a reader, darling readers, I would love to hear, like, what is it for you about a series that keeps you coming back and wanting more? And like, when is enough enough? I'm always curious about that too. Like, I can rattle off a number of my favorite series. I'm currently reading the last of the Jacqueline Winspear, Maisie Dobbs, and I have read every book in that series, and I've been following along, and she went out on tour this year and announced this is it, she's done, which really? I respect. But I would keep reading these forever. And then there are other series that I've read for a while, and at some point I'm like, okay, I'm done with. So I'm fascinated by that from a reading perspective.
That stinks to know that, because that was always a go-to gift. If there's a new Jacqueline Winspear, I can just say, all right, it's an auto buy. Yeah,
exactly. I know. Yeah. But yeah, tell us in the comments, darlings, like, what is it about series writing that, like, resonates with you? I'm curious.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, so that wraps up another episode of Reality Writes. And again, if you like it, if you like listening to Reality Writes, please share it with a friend. Just send it along to a reader or writer who might gain some knowledge, have a laugh or two, and just enjoy it. It'd be great. It would help us out if you share it, or drop a like and or a comment. But thank you for listening, and until next time.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, darlings.